It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. From roommates to co-hosts, this is the BS Sports Show with Brendan Azoff and Stefan Rosner. Your go-to destination for New York hockey and NHL news. And now it's time to drop the puck. Here are your hosts, Brendan Azoff and Stefan Rosner.
Let that beat finish. Welcome to the BS Sports Show, everybody. I'm Brendan Azoff. With me, as always, is Stefan Rosner. We got a couple of great interviews on the show today, a lot of new information to talk about. But first, we're going to start with That's BS because the Islanders, yet again, rubbing it into their fans. Stefan, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good, and watching Ovechkin just embarrass the Rangers every third goal, he's just so good at hockey, Brendan. It's kind of crazy.
I remember watching that game live and thinking to myself, how does nobody get a piece of him, right? I mean, you saw three guys in that one video try to get a piece of him and just miss. Like, just go through his chest, man. It's not that hard to take that chest. Now, granted, it is hard when it's Alexander Ovechkin, but three guys in the NHL, one of them should be able to put him on his butt.
Well, I didn't remember when Ovechkin didn't have any gray hair, so.
It seems like a long time ago. He's got that Justin Bieber haircut, still got his teeth. It's a crazy look for him, but hey, he worked it well and still scoring at the same exact rate he did when he was 25 now later on in his career.
And we'll talk about Ovechkin later in the show, but let's kick it off with the Islanders doing their fans no favors whatsoever. So again, hate the fishermen. I hate it, but for the fans that love it, this has to be the biggest FU I have ever seen to a fan base because you're a fisherman fan. You begged for it to be on a jersey. The Islanders, you don't know what the conversation was, but they decide, no, we're not doing that. What do they release? Fisherman apparel. It's crazy because I have friends that go, this is the dumbest thing ever, but I bought all of them. It's just like, why? I think it's a pity thing. I think they knew that fans wanted it. They didn't get it, so they said, let's release apparel. It's cool stuff besides the logo, but it's Islander stuff. And if you're an Islander fan that likes the fisherman, go get the stuff because it's cool. You got a backpack, a shirt, a beanie. But at the same time, it's like, all right, you're just doing this to please the fans that didn't get on a jersey. So it is what it is.
That color scheme, by the way, looks much better on hats, shirts, and book bags than it does on that jersey that they had back in the day. So, I mean, I would like to get it. I think that in that sense, the logo looks nice. If they release the fisherman jersey, I would have liked to see a different twist because I wasn't a big fan of the curvature that they had in the design when it was originally released. But this is so funny to me. Just the amount of people on Twitter that are either pro or anti-fisherman, and they go with a basic, one of the most boring retro releases, and then all of a sudden the next 2 days later they're trolling with this type of release, and people are buying it, which means, in all honesty, if you really wanted to make money, you probably should have released the real fisherman jerseys.
It's all about making money. Every year every team has new jerseys, this and that. It's because not because they want to wear them on the ice 3 times a year. It's because, hey, we could sell this and make an extra amount of money. So if the Islanders really wanted to sell and make money, yeah, they probably should have gone the fisherman route, no matter what I think about it, because I have no say in what they do. And I think it looks really nice because the logo is so damn small.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the orange and teal is a cool color scheme. No matter what, it's going to look nice. But the way that they did it here, it's actually a pretty nice jersey to look at.
Yeah, but I'm over the fisherman conversation. Let's move on.
All right, so now the NHL, it's in an interesting time period because obviously everybody wants them to come back. They want to come back January 1st, which is looking unrealistic, especially as the days go by. The NBA is announcing their comeback. You have the NFL on now, and the NHL needs to have a season, especially for financial reasons. Yet the way that the owners and Gary Bettman are going about the CBA, they're now asking the NHL players to give up more money, which is something that won't happen, especially considering how much they had to lose last year. So I think it's on the ownership and Gary Bettman especially to get this settled, but I really hope there's an NHL season this year.
Well, yeah, we all wanted January 1st, and the thing is now is COVID's come back bigger than ever. More cases, all that kind of stuff. We just found out today that a couple of Vegas players tested positive, and you don't know what that means, their families, all that kind of stuff. It's just out of their control because they did it in the bubble. It's fine. But now these players are home. You don't know who they've been with. I know a couple of the Vegas guys did help out at a food bank. So did they get it there? Did they bring it there? That's the danger. When these guys come back from the offseason, they're all going to get tested. It's all going to happen, but you don't know with false positives or someone can test negative one day, positive the next day, and then the whole season goes to shambles. We see it in the NFL. People are testing, but for NFL, they travel once a week to one location. They're not every single day meeting new players, new teams, all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. But Bettman said there's no what if a season. There has to be a season. And we all know with money being tight, they need a season, and the NHL's in a really bad position. So I think the owners, as much as they want the players to forfeit a ton of money, they have to work together. Look at baseball.
Yep.
They didn't want to work together. But they realized the only way they were going to play is if they did work together, and they got a season. They had some issues with COVID first off because people weren't following. They had a season. They had a successful playoff. They crowned the champion, and they move on and wait for the beginning of this season. Hockey needs to do the same thing. Doesn't matter how long it takes, because at the end of the day, we want a season in January. But if the players aren't happy, people start opting out and doing all that kind of stuff. Then what's the point? But if both sides could find a way to be happy and get a season going, even if it's in February, that has to happen. It
does. And Emily Kaplan of ESPN wrote an article about this thing with Greg Wyshynski as well. And apparently in the article, it says Gary Bettman told NHL owners that missing this season is not an option due to financial ramifications of the pandemic. So, I mean, that pretty much says it all, that there is no ifs, ands, or buts. There has to be an NHL season, especially if there's still no gate revenue, because they have to get that money from TV. You have to have some type of merchandise sales, some game type of sales. And this has really hit every single sports league hard, but especially the NHL, considering the NHL's TV deals significantly less. They make a lot more money off gate revenue than all the other sports. And they need, especially if some buildings wind up having fans at some point during the season, they need to have a season this year. And I mean, Emily Kaplan, great writer for ESPN. We have Chris Peters coming on, also an ESPN writer, momentarily. But the NHL is this has to get resolved. There's no way around it. We've seen so many lockouts with Gary Bettman and how he has this way of negotiating with players and kind of treats them a little less than what they should be. And I'm sure he feels like the players are the same way to him. But you got to scratch all that bad history, all those feelings, and realize that in order to make any type of money and keep the league afloat for the most part, you need a season.
Yeah, and then, think about, well, if it's a shortened season, they want to play all 82. But it's got to be what can you do, what's manageable. I mean, look back, the year that the Blackhawks had that crazy record in the shortened season. You just remembered it now because I said it. But if you think back, who won the Cup in 2014 or whatever year it was, you don't go, but that was only 48 regular season games. No, it was a season.
Yep.
In the moment, yes, wow, it's a shortened season. It shouldn't count. It's a coup. In 2 or 3 years, no one's going to think about that. They're going to think about, that person won the Stanley Cup then. It was a fun season. We need sports back. As much people say, we don't really need sports. No, we need sports back, but not over the safety. If it's not safe to return, you can't. But if it's safe to return and the players and the owners want to be selfish, which they might have the right, hockey players for a long, long time were not given what they were due. The league was making a ton of money. We learned about it, Brendan.
Yep.
The players were getting nothing. So now, if anything, you can't go to the owners and go, well, we used to not get paid at all because it's a different time. They both got to, if the players, you want players to take a pay cut, all right, owners, upper management, take a pay cut. That's how it has to happen. It's not going to be one side wins, one side loses, because let's say the players lose, what is pushing them from going out there and giving it all they got? In a situation where they could risk their health, they could risk their family's health, injuries, rushing to get into games, having a couple, 2 or 3 in a 5-day span. If they get hurt and look back and go, well, I was playing for nothing. I'm not getting nearly as much as I should be, and now I'm hurt, and now my career's over. That's going to be a problem. They need to both come together.
Yeah, I mean, that's an issue that's brought to light now, especially more considering there's outside circumstances that are impacting their willingness to play. But, I mean, rookie contract, you could still get significantly injured. We saw a Rangers defenseman, Michael Sauer, took a hit, had concussion symptoms the rest of his career, never really played again. So, I mean, that's something that's always been prevalent in the sport. And I think that for the NHL especially, getting the players on board with the money and getting the league on board with, probably giving up some more money to the players than they're used to, it has to happen for the league to have a successful 2020-21 season.
Yes, and now we'll be joined by Chris Peters. I will add him to the stream now. Mr. Peters, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
We are good. Brendan, you want to kick it off?
I will. So, Chris, thank you for joining us. The first question we got is, with many of us waiting for the NHL hockey to return, college hockey is back. For fans that are new to the college atmosphere, which I'm sure a lot are right now, which teams are must-watch, and how has COVID impacted the scheduling this season?
Yeah, well, I mean, like everything, it's impacting college hockey every single day. We have had some games. The Big Ten has probably been the league so far that's been least interrupted. So that allows you to see a team like the University of Michigan, which is probably one of the top teams in the country right now in terms of both talent and then obviously the name recognition that comes with the University of Michigan. And they have one of the best freshman classes I think we've seen in really anywhere at any time. I mean, they have 3 guys that could be top 10 picks in this year's draft. They've got Brendan Brisson, who was a first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights last year, Thomas Bordeleau, who was a second-rounder of the Sharks. Those are the guys that have really stepped up so far. But the 3 draft eligible players to watch are Kent Johnson, Matty Beniers, and a real legitimate number 1 overall prospect in Owen Power, who's a top defenseman and really could be the first pick in the draft. So that's probably the first team. And then what we're looking forward to here in the next couple of weeks, next week actually, the NCHC, which is the conference that has like North Dakota and Denver and Minnesota Duluth. They're supposed to open essentially a bubble for the first 3 weeks of their season, and we are hopeful that they'll get to that point in Omaha on December 1st and play. Basically, each team would play 10 games while they're in that bubble. And so that could be a huge thing for college hockey. But North Dakota, Denver, 2 of the best teams in the country. I think, Minnesota Duluth they won 2 national championships and then were, poised to potentially compete for a 3rd last year. But, obviously everything got shut down. So they've lost quite a few players from their most recent team, most notably Scott Perunovich, who won the Hobey Baker last year and signed his first pro deal with the St. Louis Blues. But that's a team that certainly is worth keeping an eye on as well. So, there are a lot of different things that we're kind of keeping an eye on. Harvard and the ECAC, all the Ivy League teams, Harvard, Cornell, Princeton, Brown, they're all Yale. They are not going to play this season, so that's really unfortunate. A lot of those teams are seeing players enter the transfer portal. So we've got Union and RPI are another 2 schools that have decided not to play. And so the ECAC is essentially down to 4 teams in that conference. And already we've seen 2 of those teams delay their seasons because of coronavirus. So it is unfortunate that we're going to have to continue to deal with this, but that's just the way that it is.
Yeah, like you said, everybody's going through this. But another team I want to look at is Penn State. They came in ranked number 9. That's the highest they've ever been ranked. They start the season 0-3. They lose to number 11 ranked Minnesota and fall yesterday to number 14 ranked Wisconsin. They play Wisconsin, I think, at 6 o'clock today. Is it a must win with a shortened season and Penn State having all these high hopes?
It's still early, and I think it's you kind of have to be patient, and I think we all have to give everybody a little bit of leeway. Nothing's really normal in this time, but I think that it's been a disappointing start, and unfortunately for Penn State, it's also been a really tough start for their football team. So they're just looking for some good news. But right now, the Nittany Lions, what I've noticed in the games I've seen, like in their game specifically last night, they vastly outshot the Wisconsin Badgers, and so they prove that they can compete and they can skate with those teams, and in some ways even be the better team. But they've kind of been unlucky to run against really solid goaltending. And I think the University of Minnesota team that they played in the first weekend of their season was just simply the better team. And Minnesota, absolutely another team that people should be keeping an eye on for this season because they look really solid. But for Penn State, I think what they really need to figure out is who's going to be their number 1 goaltender. I don't think that that's been solved yet. And that's going to be a key thing. They had Peyton Jones for 4 years, where he was able to kind of be the guy that carried the mail for them in net, and he's gone now. So they're trying to figure out which of their current goaltenders is the right one. They have offensive firepower. That is not a huge concern. But at this point, I think, absolutely, just to get some positive vibes in the program, you certainly want to win. I don't think it's a must win, but it's certainly a game that you got to get some positivity going in the program, and it would be one that would be nice to have.
Yeah, we were talking about it. They outshot them, 52-20 something, Brennan?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It comes to the point where they look like a team that if they get any type of puck luck in their next game, they might be able to get on a little bit of a roll. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, so another team, LIU, is in their first inaugural season. They got their first win in overtime. It was a crazy game. And who are some players to look out for on that squad, and what do you think about the program in general?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say in terms of, players to watch, because so many of these guys were kind of, late in the game. They were looking for that first college opportunity. They managed to get some transfers that really helped them. But I think for LIU, just to go on the team in general, I think what they have is they have a really good head coach in Brett Riley. And when the team was announced that it was going to happen, there was a lot of skepticism, me included. Like, how are they going to pull this off? They basically had 4 months to build a roster when so many schools had already recruited. So for that whole thing, it was kind of, it was the way that it came together and how quickly it came together was shocking. And to win their first game I think they were the first team to win their first game as a program since Robert Morris University did and that I believe was in the 15 or 16 years ago. That's a pretty impressive feat in itself to beat Holy Cross. But one of the guys that really stood out in that first game is their goaltender, Garrett Metcalf. Now, he transferred from Mercyhurst. He also previously played at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. He had, I believe, over 40 saves in that first game. He is an Anaheim Ducks draft pick. I don't necessarily know that he's going to sign an NHL contract when things are all said and done in his collegiate career. But here's a guy that has experience. He's a graduate transfer. He's played college hockey. He actually played with Brett Riley's cousins, who both played at Mercyhurst. So he knows the Riley family to a certain extent. And the Riley family, of course, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about Brett. He's a third generation Division I college hockey coach. His grandfather, Jack, was the head coach at Army for years. His father, Rob, was the head coach at Army for years. Now his uncle, Brian, is the coach at Army. And Jack also was the head coach of the first ever Olympic gold medal team for USA in 1960. So, it is in his blood. And what he's done so far with this program is incredible. I don't know yet. We have to see once they get in the teeth of their schedule, and they're playing mostly against Atlantic hockey competition, which, is kind of the one of the lower tier conferences in college hockey. But still, you look at the way that, they have plenty of quality teams in that conference as well. So I'm excited to see what LIU does. I think that they're going to be able to continue to recruit quality players, especially from Long Island and from New York, and people that want to stay close to New York City. That's one thing that they can offer that a lot of other programs cannot. And I think that they have a real opportunity to do something special over these next few years. It's going to take a little while to get them going.
Yeah, we got a couple of friends on that team, so we wish them the best of luck. it's cool as a new program. There's a lot of unknowns, but when you win your first game in overtime, that's just got to get everybody psyched and ready to go.
Yeah, I still can't believe it, and I think it's what a storybook opening to the season, and I really think that the sky's the limit for that program, and they certainly the players that I've talked to that are playing there, the motivation and the focus that they have as a group. It's not just that a lot of these guys were passed over by other colleges, so it's kind of like that Golden Knights mentality where It's like, hey, we were passed over, let's play with a chip on our shoulder, and it's been great to see that when you can convert that into a positive energy, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Sometimes having no pressure is a very good way to go. When there's no real anyone going, oh, this team's got to be amazing. You come out firing, everyone's, well, there you go. But yeah, Brendan, go on.
Yeah, I know that they won an OT, but the story after the game was that video. All 3 sets of their goaltenders had phenomenal pads. So their color scheme really works in that sense too. So even if they don't finish with a winning record, they're winning in that sense. But
they're always going to look good.
Yeah, they are. And you briefly touched on Michigan in the first question. They started off 4-0. They look really good. They have a lot of talent on that team. Do you think they're legitimate Frozen Four contenders, and how well do you think they're going to finish this year?
Well, I do think they are legitimate Frozen Four contenders. It is really difficult for young teams to win, and they have 10 freshmen. And I mentioned a lot of the guys already, but really I think the most important player for them is not all of their freshmen. They're obviously hugely important, but it's their goaltender, Strauss-Mann. He's the co-captain of the team. He is a junior. He was one of the top goaltenders in the country last season. Legitimate, Mike Richter candidate for goaltender of the year again this year. He has been lights out so far in this season. He's a big reason. They showed against Arizona State that they can blow you out. They showed against Wisconsin that they can also win the close games. Those are huge tests for them. I think the biggest tests are still ahead. I do still think, let's see how they do against Minnesota. Let's see how they do against a grinded out team like a Michigan State that is going to try to really clog things up and in that rivalry atmosphere. There's a lot to look forward to. They're going to play Notre Dame this weekend, and Notre Dame has plenty of veterans in their group, and that's a tough team to play. So you kind of look at and see how are they going to handle that. But I think in terms of talent, in terms of depth, there are a few teams that can match them at this point. Thomas Bordeleau and Kent Johnson are two of the most skilled players in college hockey as true freshmen right now. They have made some incredible plays already this season. Owen Power and Cam York, Philadelphia Flyers first rounder 2 years ago, is now a sophomore. Are defensemen that could play for any team in the country and be their number one defenseman. So I think that the depth that they have as a group and the fact that they have the goaltending and they have a great coaching staff, I really do think that this is a team that not only could compete in the Frozen Four, but they are a legitimate national title contender. And there's still a long way to go. We have to hope that the season gets completed. But the way that I've seen them play, I mean, this is a Michigan team that is incredible. It's one of the best recruiting classes that I've personally seen since I've been covering college hockey, and that goes back, over 10 years. And it's hard to find another situation where you could be that confident in your young class of freshmen like they should be.
And
No, go 7.
And they're that young, which means that they'll be competing for the next couple of years unless any of them go, get out of school early. But I mean, this is a program that could be good, the top dogs for a couple of years with such a young group.
Yeah, and they still have a great recruiting class next year. So they have Luke Hughes and Mackie Samoskevich, who are two guys that are not at Michigan yet. And Luke Hughes is the brother of Jack and Quinn Hughes, and he's looking like he could be a top 5 pick in this upcoming draft. Samoskevich looks like a first rounder, and those guys aren't even there yet. So I anticipate that they will lose some of these guys, like a Matty Beniers maybe, or an Owen Power. Maybe they're one and done type players or two and done type players. But then you've got that next wave coming, and there are just so many other players that the depth is going to allow them to shine. And yeah, I do think that they have something special going for the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's not the typical hockey powerhouse when you think of NCAA schools, but they're obviously building a great program there, and they're going to be very competitive. Chris, thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Take care.
All right, so that was Chris Peters of ESPN.com, big hockey writer there, great stuff, always good articles for him, and we really appreciate that insight, especially me and you don't usually watch college hockey. Obviously now we're trying to get into it a little bit more, but some of those games, I watched a little bit of that Wisconsin-Penn State game yesterday, and I couldn't believe the absolute whopping Penn State put on Wisconsin in the second period, and yet 24-2 the shots on goal, they were down 3-1.
I mean, you look at a game like that, and it's goaltending. At that point, it's your goalie better be good that night if you can give up that many shots. But yeah, you guys want to follow Chris Peters on Twitter? It's at Chris M. Peters. Again, ESPN staff writer. We thank him so much for being here. Great insight.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, what the part of college sports that are so amazing is usually the fans, right? It's a weird atmosphere where you'd think NHL, NBA, all these pro sports have more fans, but the uniqueness of the students being there, every school has its own unique way of watching it. And now you take that away, right? So the NCAA tournament's always been crazy with fans. Now it's going to be different, especially in basketball. Now hockey, it's a different type of atmosphere. So the way that these schools react to it, you have a non-typical Michigan team that usually is a back-end type of NCAA team. They're never on the top, and all of a sudden they're competing and got the extremely talented roster. When we come back from this commercial break, we're going to get into some league news. We're going to go over the NHL and NBC sports lists that came out with goaltending and under 25-year-old players. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the BS Sports Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Welcome back to the BS Sports Show, everybody. Brendan and Stefan here with you, and I think we're going to kick things off with the wraparound right now, and we got some big news coming out of Chicago, Stefan.
Two-time Olympic medalist Kendall Coyne-Schofield as a player development coach, and it's so big for a franchise that is going into a rebuild. It is clear a rebuild is happening. Why not get a hockey player that knows exactly what happens at the lower level, working her way up. She's an unreal hockey talent of her own, and she's only going to help this club.
Yeah, she really is. And I mean, we know Kendall Coyne-Schofield from her Olympic U.S. trials with, all those battles with Canada, being one of the more prevalent figures on that team. And yet 6-time gold medal winner in 7 IHF tournaments. That's absurd, right? I mean, that's how much success she has. She knows how to bring a winning culture to whatever team she will be a part of. And I know last year, was it, when she skated in the fastest skater competition that Matt Barzal won? So obviously Barzal's a storyline there and how fast he is, but she put up like a 14-3 time. She beat Clayton Keller.
She was quick.
She really was. And think about this, right? She's only 5'2". So now she's going against all these guys that most of them are 5'11" and up. So they have that almost 10-inch to 11-inch stride advantage right there. And didn't matter for her. She got low, and I was so impressed. Like, you skated, I've skated, going around corners. You usually have to stop your feet, right? You got to make a little bit of a sharp turn before you pick it up. It's really hard to keep striding the full time, especially when you're going at that speed. Yet never once did she stop striding around those corners, which is it was pretty incredible to watch.
I think it's a perfect fit too. I mean, you bring someone who's everywhere she goes, it's winning. Yep. It's all about winning. You go to a team in the Blackhawks who they're a team that wins. Even in a bad year like this year, they still made it to the playoffs. They still have stars, Taves, Kane, obviously, and Keith, and they'll let Corey Crawford go. That's like the first piece. Sharp left a couple of years ago, but that was like the first piece of that big group to go. And she's going to be with Rockford in the AHL. But they have so many prospects. They have young guys. They're looking to turn a page. You want leaders. You need leaders. Even, a guy in the AHL is not he might look up to Patrick Kane as a player, but Patrick Kane's not teaching that kid how to play, teaching that kid how to develop. Now it's her job. So I think this is really perfect, a really, really good fit for this program. And you look at it in sports right now. Women are being hired. It's not because, it's good PR. While PR is definitely good when you do stuff like this, I'm telling you right now, the Blackhawks aren't hiring somebody that's not qualified to help their club turn the page. And for a club that's in the dire need of leadership at the minor league level and development to turn the page and get back to those consistent playoff seasons, she's a perfect fit.
Yeah, listen, she might not have played in the NHL, but she still knows the game of hockey, still knows what it takes to develop and get better. So no reason why she's not qualified to fill this role for the Chicago Blackhawks. They made a lot of hires other than Kendall Coyne-Schofield. They hired a former NHL player to the same type of position as well. So they're definitely revamping their whole entire team, whether it's the players or staff, and then they're looking to get an increase in that right direction, and rightfully so. I mean, listen, you mentioned the rebuild that they're hitting, right? We've seen the Rangers go into a rebuild. We've seen numerous teams that have tried to rebuild on the fly and have failed, aka the Buffalo Sabres, numerous times. But you look at the Chicago Blackhawks, they still have a core in place. They have a lot of young talent we've seen last year in Dominic Kubalik, Alex DeBrincat's still young. So you think that if there's a team that's positioned to rebuild similar to the Rangers on the fly, where they can keep the competitive nature not at the same level they're used to, it's this team. And now adding somebody like Kendall Coyne-Schofield to your AHL coaching staff helps.
I mean, when you have one of the best scorers in the league, and Patrick Kane, I think is only 30. He's been around a while. Taves is a two-way defenseman, very good defensive forward. And that's something I must mess that up. And a great center, but he plays well in his own zone. And I think for a team rebuilding, and you see all these young guys want to come up and, play a respectful type of hockey. Look at a guy like that. He's so responsible with the puck. It doesn't matter if he's 35, 36, 37. He does his job and leads by example. He's a captain.
Yep.
He's the last one off the rink when his team wins. He's always speaking to the media. They have pieces in place to still be competitive with the group they have. It's not a complete rebuild where they're going to trade Kane, trade Taves. We're just rebuilding around these guys. They still have years left, and like I said, she's going to do a great job in helping that.
Yeah, she definitely is. And after the fastest skater competition, she got that awkward interview with Pierre Maguire out the way, so she's officially a member of the NHL club, right? And another member of the NHL club, obviously the most elite member of all time, is Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky holds the NHL record in pretty much everything that ever exists in the NHL, but 894 goals is still the mark to beat. It's the highest, and which is crazy that he holds it because he also has a ridiculous amount of assists that we all know how good of a player he was. Now, another very good player is Jaromir Jagr. Jagr came out and said that he believes Alexander Ovechkin, if he stays healthy, can break Wayne Gretzky's 894 goal record. What do you think of that?
Statistically, Possible. Realistically, probably not. But, let's head back to the calculators, Brendan, because I'm such a math guy.
I'm a nerd over here.
So, did the math. Ovechkin averages 47 goals a year. So, right now, he's at 706 goals, and he's 35. He said he wants to play 5 more years before returning to the KHL. So, if my math is correct, that's now 235 goals over the next 5 years. That would end him with 940 goals. The problem is, like you said, I don't think he's going to get hurt. But at some point in the career, you are no longer your top. You're not playing to the level you were once playing. Age gets to you. And while Ovechkin looks like the same player he's been, slowly over time, you're going to see him slow down. That's a natural thing. He's not going to be scoring 50 goals in his life. I mean, he might. You never know, because Ovechkin, the thing that's so good about him is he doesn't have to reinvent himself. It's some players, okay, they figure out what you do. You see it in baseball or in any sport, hockey. This guy shoots blocker side or cuts to the middle every time. Well, now he's got to change it up. Ovechkin takes these one-timers from the same spot all the time, and it works. Why? He doesn't have to reinvent himself. He doesn't have to try new things. That's going to work. Once that is taken away from him, let's say he's getting up there. Let's say he's 37, 38, and he's having a hard time getting position over there. And maybe the shots, you lose a bit of a mile per hour off the shot or two. Then you see his numbers drop. But I don't see any reason why his numbers are ever going to drop if he does that. Now, injuries, age, the team around him too. As he gets older, you need more pieces around him. He can't be the center of attention every single time. And I think the Capitals are doing a good job with that. Tom Wilson on his line, where Ovechkin doesn't have to be that physical juggernaut he usually is, because he has Tom Wilson doing that for him. So taking away the little other responsibilities from Ovechkin will lead to that. But at the same time, though, Ovechkin's got to be good in his own zone. It's not all about scoring. I mean, we're talking about personal stuff right now. But at the same time, I think Ovechkin rather win another cup than pass the great Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, of course. And when you talk about Alexander Ovechkin, the thing that never really gets brought up is that he is 6'3", 236 pounds. You just mentioned the physical presence. He's somebody that's been able to will his way around the ice. Now, right now, he seems to be defying Father Time, right? I mean, it seems that every year his production level stays the same. He avoids the injuries, knock on wood for him, because the game's better when he's healthy. Now, as you start to deteriorate just a little bit, that one physical bump that he usually takes might be enough to tweak something and slow him down for a couple of weeks, at which case your production level slowly decreases. And this is not a knock on him, right? Obviously, there's a reason Wayne Gretzky's record has stood with all these great players and goal scorers that have come into the league. But yet, if there is a player, and we've talked about this in other shows, I really do think he will catch him, because he's not that far off. If you round up, he's 200 goals away that he has to get. 200 goals over 5 years at somebody that's been scoring so consistently is not much. And guess what? After 5 years, if he's still 10 short, I guarantee you see him come back for a sixth season.
Oh, where's that playing from?
I don't know.
Interesting. Anyway, so no, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I don't see him slowing down. But you're telling me he's gonna score that many over? That's a lot of goals. But if anybody could do it, it's him. I mean, again, it's because he, first off, on the power play, that helps. That's also a thing. If the Capitals struggle on the power play over the next 5 years, Ovechkin's not scoring as many power play goals from that one beautiful spot he loves to call his sweet spot. But if over the next 5 years they're hitting 24 to 28% on the power play every year, and he's the main guy scoring, that helps. So it also depends on that too. It's not just about what he can do; it's about how his team around him plays, how the opponents play. It's very interesting. And then also too, with the division realignments and all that stuff, let's say, I don't know his stats offhand, but let's say Ovechkin dominates the Bruins. I doubt it, but let's say he dominates the Bruins.
Dominates everybody.
Yes, but let's say there's one team he's going to play a ton of times this year that he kills the Islanders, kills them. He plays more games against the Islanders this year, racks up more points. Maybe they keep the alignment, whatever it is. It's like, okay, now he's got a greater chance because he's playing these select amount of teams. Or if there was another team that he plays that he struggles against, now he's playing them more times. That's going to take a toll as well. But my overall answer is going to be no. I wouldn't be shocked if he did, but I'm going to say it's not happening.
So I really want to say yes to this. Like, I feel like if I've never seen a player just find the back of the net with such ease, right? So I think that it might happen. I'm going to say no, not because of him, but because the Washington Capitals are slowly losing that grip that they've had on the Metro and hockey over the last 5 seasons. This year is probably their last really competitive cup level caliber season. And after that, Ovechkin gets up there in age. Their defense is already starting to deteriorate. Samsonov and Lundqvist is the tandem this year. Lundqvist will be out of contract. How well does Samsonov perform? It still remains to be seen. He only had one season. So I think he'll be good, but there's a lot more ifs than there are guarantees in the Capitals roster, as opposed to just 3 or 4 seasons ago when they were a complete juggernaut.
The last thing I will say is that's another thing. Lundqvist is no longer on the Rangers, so Ovechkin can't torch him.
Yep. Well, I mean, he'll still torch the Rangers. To me, the way that his stats go, right? He scores against every team. The teams that he plays the most, after one game, if he doesn't score, he realizes what he has to do the next game to put the puck in the net. And he's the type of guy that his goals that he scores are all big goals too. The amount of times that he's come down with the Capitals trailing in the third period against the Rangers and just done something unreal to score and tie the game up or to take a lead late in the game. He's legitimately one of the best goal scorers I've ever watched, and probably most of us have ever watched and will watch. That's how talented this man is. No,
I think there's not much more you can say about that. He is the most talented scorer. Gretzky had all these goals, but Gretzky transcended the game of hockey. Gretzky was so much better than everybody else. Now, during the time watching him, it's, oh, wow, this guy's that good. And you look back 20 years later and go, he was just that much better. You look at McDavid, how easy it is for somebody, McKinnon, how easy. But they're not transcending the game. They're just the top players. And now can McDavid be the best player of all time when it's all said and done? I'm going to say no just because of injuries. He seems to get hurt too often. But you look at a guy like Ovechkin, he hasn't transcended the game where he was superior to everybody else in the league by a mile. That's why I don't think he will pass them, because with technology, with scouting, with all the stuff they have now they didn't have back then, the opponents are more ready for a guy like that. And also, I'm not saying the hard work and dedication is different, but it takes a lot more to play at the level now. Yep. With the skill around you, the just evolution with bigger, stronger players than it did back then. So for that reason, like I said, I think Gretzky keeps that for the end of time.
That's very fair points that you made. And before we move on to our next topic, just a reminder, you can call us starting at 6:45 at 802-294-2777. Again, the phone line's open at 6:45. We look forward to hearing from some of you. As many calls as we can take, we will answer. So moving on now, the NHL Network released a list of their top 10 goaltenders, right? They released a fan list first, which kind of teased, and everybody was like, all right, this better not be legit because there were some weird questions on there. But then they released their own list, and it honestly didn't really suffice for me either. So you're the on-staff goaltender. I'll let you read the list and give us what you agree with and what you disagree with.
Yeah, so 1 through 10, Andrei Vasilevsky, Tuukka Rask, Connor Hellebuyck, Ben Bishop, Jordan Binnington, Carey Price, Darcy Kemper, Robin Lehner, Jacob Markstrom, Anton Khudobin. And this is an interesting thing is, well, what do you take of a backup over a starter? We know how good Khudobin was. We know how good he was. In the regular season, he was solid. I think he led all goalies with his save percentage. I'm pretty sure at .930. He led the whole entire NHL, obviously less games. Bishop's been hurt. We saw what he did in the playoffs. He helped Dallas get to where they got, and he struggled in the Stanley Cup Finals, I'll say. He took a step back, but again, he's exhausted. He's a backup at the NHL level. Does he deserve to be on a top 10 list of goalies in the NHL? No. Did he have a good run? Yes. Top 10 goalie in the NHL? No, but you look at this list, and Tuukka Rask had the best regular season stats of everybody, the best regular season stats. He would have won the Vezina if it wasn't for Connor Hellebuyck, who's on a significantly weaker team than the Boston Bruins. So, I like the 1-2 there. Vasilevsky's Vasilevsky. He's the best player. Stats, you see what he does in the playoffs. They won a championship. He deserves to be up there. I don't like Ben Bishop, but I have to give him credit. His stats are phenomenal. But you have Jordan Binnington at number 5. This is what Jordan Binnington this season. You tell me if he's the 5th best goaltender in the NHL, that's a problem because he had a .912 save and a 2.56 goals against. Well, that's not terrible. That's not top 5 in the NHL. Kemper this year for me, phenomenal year. I like that he's on this list because I feel like some people would even leave him off this list. Robin Lehner, he had a great year. Markstrom, an unreal year. I don't think Binnington should be that high. Now, Carey Price, people want to say he's overrated. He's not the best goalie in the league by far, but I would rather see Price above Binnington. And even Kemper above Binnington as well. I think they just showed more. And Binnington, it's not like Binnington was on a bad team. He was on a very good team. Darcy Kemper stole games for the Coyotes. He stole games during the regular season. He tried his hardest in the playoffs, but you're playing top-level talent. He can only do so much. A guy like Markstrom battled on a Vancouver Canucks team that's weaker than St. Louis. So for Binnington, it's not a pity. Putting him at 5 seems like a pity thing to me. Well, He had a great first rookie campaign, then a great playoff run. They obviously won a cup. I didn't see enough from him this year to even have him consideration to be a top 10 goalie in the league, maybe even top 15. And I really do think he's one of those guys that he's not going to be that good next year, this upcoming year. I just don't think he's as good as he projected in that big cup run. So for me, I would love to see him drop down and see a guy like Kemper go ahead of him.
Well, I'll say this. I think that you are very hard on Binnington.
I am.
His numbers weren't bad at all.
They weren't terrible.
And he just had a bad postseason. He will be good next year because it's still a very good team. Darcy Kemper only played 29 games. Anton Khudobin played 30 as a backup. So you have to take his great year with a grain of salt. Now, I'm very high on Darcy Kemper, too. I think he's a very good goaltender. I also think that he should be a little lower on this list just because of the fact that he did only play 29 games. But that being said, Anton Khudobin can't be on this list because you have Ben Bishop on it. The Stars don't have two of the top 10 goalies in the league. I'm sorry, it's just not true. Anton Khudobin had a great postseason run, had a very good regular season. He's been a very good backup in his career. But at the end of the postseason, he started to wear down a little bit, and then the Stanley Cup finally got exposed on some of his angles. I don't think that he is better than every other team starter. That's what they're saying right here, is that the other teams remaining, he's better than every single one of their star goaltenders. I don't know. I think, will he fall in the next 5, like in the top 15? Sure. Top 10, I'm not quite sold on that yet. Carey Price had a terrible season, especially for his standards, but he's still Carey Price, right? We saw what he could do in the postseason. So I like where he is. You could flip-flop him in Binnington if you want, but I don't know. The top 4 I like. I like Ben Bishop. I know you don't.
I know you do.
But, I mean, other than that, it's a good list. Darcy Kemper, I would lower him behind Leonard, and then Khudobin can't be on that list. Now, as far as who replaces Khudobin, that's a great question.
Well, it's simple. For me, it's simple.
Are you going to say Carter Hart?
Well, I was going to say Carter Hart. You're talking about right now. This has nothing to do with past experience. So right now, Carter Hart's a better goalie. Samsonov, I would take ahead of him. I would even put Shesterkin ahead of him.
I would not take Samsonov
Why?
yet, and I wouldn't take Shesterkin yet. Just not enough proof.
But again, he's on a good team, but Holtby was terrible. Without Samsonov, without Samsonov, the Capitals aren't where they were.
Okay, so Holtby had a terrible year, and Samsonov played well. But Samsonov only played 26 games. He had a .913 and .255. If you're saying Binnington had terrible numbers, his was worse.
Yeah. All right.
So I can't put him in not the top 10 yet at all.
What about Hart?
The two that I would pick were Carter Hart or Tristan Jarry.
Okay, I can see that.
Jarry had a very, very good season. He was an all-star. Carter Hart, we know what he could do talent-wise. Not numbers that'll blow you away necessarily, but still very solid numbers, good enough to be a top 10, especially considering how young he is still. So that's who I would replace them with, especially because they're given that starter role. They're told at the beginning of the season, you're going to be the guy that's carrying it. Khudobin's told, if Bishop gets hurt, you'll take over. It's a different mentality. And this is not a knock on Khudobin. It's just hard to have two goaltenders on one team in a top 10 list. And if you do, they both have to have exceptional numbers. Khudobin had great numbers, but not top 10 worthy.
Well, wasn't Halak and Rest took home the Jennings, right? I don't know what Halak's stats are.
They did, and they were very close. It was a 3-horse race between Dallas, Boston, and Arizona.
I mean, Halak had a great year as well, and he had a 2.39 goals against average, .919. Well, obviously, we know that Khudobin's stats were better, but that's like saying the same thing. You're going to put two of the top 10. You can't do that. Like, the reason that his stats were that good is because he played less amount of games. If you play well in those short amount of games, your stats can be better. Over a full, if he plays 35 to 40 games?
Yeah. It also helps when you're playing on a defensive team that's one of the best defensive teams in hockey. Now, granted, the Dallas Stars were very good defensively in a large part due to their goaltending, but that's still a team that they knew they were having trouble scoring and they had to lock everything down, especially once Rick Bowness took over. They really solidified defensively. So that helps, right? They're not facing the same quality of chance that some other teams are. And when they do, odds are they're going to make that save because they're a little bit fresher, right? So it's tough, right? Because this used to be a league where you can go and you could clearly say, all right, these guys are all top tier. Marc-Andre Fleury used to be up there. Lundqvist used to be up there. It was an easier group of 10. Now it's kind of polluted with some backups because a lot more teams are splitting and using a tandem-based method. So my logic is it might be a little more old school, especially in a couple of seasons. But for right now, I can't justify putting Khudobin in the top 10.
No, it's crazy. You bring up a great point. It's tandem based. I mean, you look in baseball right now with pitching. It's like more of, all right, you have a reliever start. It's not the same game that it once was. And for hockey, take the Lightning out of the way because Vasilevsky is a horse. And quite frankly, they don't have a suitable backup that they trust enough to take away from Vasilevsky playing.
Yep.
You get other teams like you have Rask and Halak. Rask is getting up there in age. He's throwing the question out there about is he going to play, is he not, retirement-wise. Halak's older as well, but again, great tandem. Hellebuck, again, he had an unreal year because it's just him. Ben Bishop, hurt. You have Khudobin, Binnington. You had Jake Allen for support. Carey Price, you didn't have really anyone to put in there. Now you have Jake Allen. So does Carey Price now and Allen become not more of a tandem, but Allen's going to play a lot more than I think he did last. I mean, he only played 20-something games last year. Depends how Carey Price does.
Depends how many games are in the season, too.
Yeah, Kemper, tandem. They had trust in both. Leonard Fleury, tandem. Markstrom, it was pretty much him and Demko, but he played the majority until he had some injuries here and there. You look at it like that. I mean, look at Columbus, where you think, well, Korpisalo had a great playoff run. He didn't have a good season. 2.60 goals against, 911 save. Wasn't great. He just turned it up. So you're never going to agree with the whole list just because you have biased thoughts and all that kind of stuff. But that's the same thing as putting, if let's say Fleury had an unreal year. It's like having Fleury and Leonard on this list. It's not possible.
Let me ask you one question before we wrap this up. You just talked about how good Korpisalo was in the postseason. If Bishop was never hurt and he didn't play, Khudobin's not even sniffing this list.
He's not touching the ice.
No, I'm talking about this list. He would never be in the top 10. If he didn't play a game in the postseason, was relegated to his backup role. So are they weighing the postseason that much? That clearly, because he played well, he gets to jump up into the top 10? Because this is a guy that's also 35 years old. He's at the end of his career now.
Well, I don't think so, because then how is Binnington 5? If you're weighing in
that's what I'm saying. What was the requirements for this list? Because Binnington had a solid regular season this year. He was phenomenal last year, phenomenal in that postseason, obviously. Yeah, struggled a little bit towards the end and struggled this postseason. Khudobin was the opposite. Khudobin had a very good regular season and then took off in the postseason when given that starting role. So are they weighing it that much that, because like I said, if he doesn't start this postseason, he's not on this list.
I think if he had a mediocre postseason, he played well, but like they didn't make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, he's not on
the list. I agree. So to me, that's why he can't be in the top 10. Very, very good goaltender. Would he, if he was given 50 to 60 starts a year, I don't think his numbers would be the same.
Now, they should have labeled this list, which they didn't do. They should have done starters and backups, like you said, because tandems are the way of the thing now, unless you have a pure number one. So I don't know how on a list of the top 10 goalies in the league, you can't put a backup because his numbers are skewed because of less games.
Yep, I agree. So we got 10 minutes before we got to go to a commercial break. Now we're going to talk about another list because this list intrigued me heavily. It's the top 25 players who are under 25. We're going to focus on the top 10 because if we go through all 25, you're going to want to move certain people one spot up, one spot down. This is a hard list to get. And the top 10, pretty much, we agreed with who they had in it. We didn't agree necessarily with the order. So I'm going to put up the NBC Sports top 10. These are only players who are under 25 years old. McKinnon just turned 25. He does not qualify. So 1 through 5 is McDavid, Matthews, Point, Pasternak, Pettersson. 6 is Miro Heiskanen, 7 Jack Eichel, 8 Mikko Rantanen, 9 Sebastian Aho, and 10 Matt Barzal. I'll give you, just based off your first impressions, what was the 1 or 2 names that you would have changed and did change on your list?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I have Eichel. He's got to be a number 2. I look at Austin Matthews, unreal talent. I get that, but look at the team around him. McDavid makes everybody around him better. Superstar. He's your clear number 1. Jack Eichel, who does he have around him? Yes, he has Taylor Hall now. But you think about the names, Olofsson, who had a great year, don't get me wrong. There's no superstar talent, though, around him. He creates, he's a captain, he's a leader. He does all the right things. That's why he's number 2 on my list, because what is around him? You look at Pasternak. Most goals, tied with the most goals in the league with Ovechkin. That's great. He's got Brad Marchand on his on one side, and he's got Patrice Bergeron in the middle. I mean, that's an all-star line. That's a line that could start an all-star game. So, of course, his number is going to be unreal. I love that. But I'm not putting him at 2 because Eichel, look at what Eichel has around him compared to that. So then I have 4 as Matthews, like it's on the list. Just looking at the differences. Pettersson, I think, is a little too high. You know, Pettersson's ranked 5 on their list. I have him at 8. I kept Aho and Barzal there because, I'm a Barzal guy, and Aho's stats aren't insanely good. So look, that's my biggest thing is that Eichel's got to be at number 2.
So I like Jack Eichel a lot. I think that him not having the help that the other players have hurts him a little bit. I have him at 4 on my list. McDavid is going to be number 1 no matter whose list you're looking at. He's that good. I think David Pastrnak, I know he plays on that phenomenal top line with Bergeron and Marchand, but he still is a guy that's going to score over 45 goals a year. He puts up points. He had 95 points last season. He had 48 goals, tied Ovechkin for that Rocket Richard. Right now, under 25, I feel like he's the second best player. Austin Matthews can score with anybody, right? He's another guy. He had 47 goals this season, and the only reason people are low on him is because Toronto hasn't taken that jump. But that's not only on him. They haven't had defense, right? He also doesn't have the line mates. He doesn't necessarily play with Marner and Tavares. He plays with, who do you say he played with? Hyman and...
Matthews plays with Hyman and...
was it Marner?
I think it might have been Marner.
Okay, so he doesn't play with... They try to separate their stars a little bit. Zach Hyman on your wing is kind of like Artemi Panarin having Jesper Fast, right? He's a solid player 2 ways, and he does his job, but it's not the skilled type of player that you necessarily want. I have Braden Point at 5 because I think that he is very good, but he's not in that top 4 elite group like the NBC had him. Our back 5, though, is pretty similar. The only difference is I have Heiskanen 1 up in front of Rantanen, and you have Rantanen in front of Heiskanen. I'm tend to be biased here towards the defenseman just because, especially with the way he played at the end and in the postseason, his skating ability is unreal, right? I mean, he really showcased how good he can be. But the rest of this list, the only one I was iffy on, but I couldn't take him out is Barzal. He's very good. But then I had Cale Makar there, and I'm like, all right, this kid is legitimate. But after one more season, if Barzal stays the same, or any of these guys stay the same, and Makar continues to progress, he's going to be replacing somebody on this list.
And also their age. One more year, some of these guys will be off that as the under 20.
That's very true. McDavid would be off of it. Eichel would probably be off of it. So, I mean, when you look at these names, right, it's crazy that these guys are all under 25. And it's not even all of them.
It's under. They could probably do a list of under 23. I mean, 23 and under. Like, I know Barzal's 23. I mean, some of these guys are just so. It's so crazy how good you could be.
Patterson's 22, I believe.
I think Braden Point's young as well. Look it up. But I mean, so many. This sport has become. I'm not going to complain. This sport has become such a young sport that so Braden Point's 24, so he'll be off this list. But it's just the young talent you have where you can't have to complain about a top 10 or even a top 25. Younger, under 25 years old. It used to be if you were that good at that young of age, you got the chance. There are a lot of veterans in the league. Now it's okay. You're not even allowed to drink. You just got out of high school. Come play with us. Come join us. If they're that good at that young of an age, it's crazy. And we see it every single year in the NHL. Oh, this young guy's coming in. We'll see how he does. We'll see how this person does.
Yep.
And they blow us away with just the raw. It's not even the skill. They have to mature as NHL players. It's the raw skill they come into. And, we talk about a guy like Lafreniere coming in who's physically mature and ready to go. A guy could be that young, like a Jack Hughes, that young, that much talent, but he's not ready to play in the NHL.
Yep.
And therefore, it's why he's not on your list like this, because he didn't dominate. A guy like Alexis Lafreniere comes to the league. He's mature and built, and he's ready to go, and he could be a guy on this list next year.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the access to training that you now have at a younger age, the level of competition throughout the world, let alone just in Canada, which it used to be Canada was elite competition, everywhere else was second nature. Not anymore. College hockey, we just talked with Chris Peters about how good the competition, especially Michigan, the young talent that they have. I mean, you look at all the junior leagues that these players come from overseas. It's just everywhere now. It's just the competition level continues to rise. And you could be 18 years old and enter the league and have the skill set. But we still see that there is an adjustment period for some players. It's only the truly exceptional players that at 18, 19 truly dominate the league. You're looking at this list. Pastrnak wasn't 18 years old dominating the league. He over the last 3 seasons, he's come on. Kakko, Hughes, they didn't do that last season. Matthews and McDavid, they did. And they're elite. So did Eichel. But the rest of these guys, it took them a year or two to fully reach that, we're going to be dominant players. Even Elias Pettersson, he had a great season last year. What do you have? He had 66 points in 68 games played. That's not his ceiling by any means. He's going to continue to progress, and he's only 22. So this list is going to look extremely different next season. But no matter who's on it, it's going to be great.
I mean, a guy not on this list, Mitch Marner. Obviously, he's on the top 25 somewhere on this list, but a guy like Mitch Marner, a player like a Matthews, while Matthews does what he does and creates and all that kind of stuff, he's probably not putting up as high of numbers without Mitch Marner, who had 51 assists this year. He had 16 goals. Boo-hoo, no goals, but you need an assist to have a goal unless it's obviously unassisted. You need assists. They're equally as important to creating offense in this league. I mean, lower on the list, a guy like Nico Hischier, who's a star with the Devils. He's not a superstar yet. Obviously, he's probably a couple years away from hitting his prime or like bust or not. We'll find out in a couple of years. But every team has that one young guy where you go, wow, he's going to be an amazing player one day. For some of these guys, like you said, this is your under 25 list. Some of these guys are on the brink of being in the league for a couple of years, which of course is going to put them to the top of the list. A lot of the young guys we talk about, like a Hischier, I mean, we have no idea what Nolan Patrick could do at the NHL level.
Yeah, if he can stay healthy. And
I think it says he's going to be back this year. He's going to at least try, but we have one season of him where it was underwhelming just because he's going through stuff. He didn't really play often. He's clearly had head issues. He could have an unreal season this year and be on this list next year. So it's very interesting to see just the amount of raw talent. The 30th guy on this list that didn't make the cut 5 spots higher is probably an unreal talent. And
it's probably Adam Fox. Now you're thinking about this list next year. Miro Heiskanen's only 21. Odds are he's going to be back on it. You could legitimately have Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, and Adam Fox, 4 defensemen. You're talking about you got Kubalik, who also had a great rookie season. He's on this list. If he continues that, we'll be on it. There's just the amount of talent. And like you said, most of the guys I just mentioned aren't even in their 23, 24, close to getting the cutoff of this list. They're very young. And you're going to add Lafreniere to this league. You're going to see if Kakko and Hughes can, and that's just locally. So the amount of under 25 talent, and you could see the teams are trying to lean towards that now too, because those are also the more affordable guys, right? You got all these young kids that are on contract, especially in a flat cap. Somebody like McDavid is so talented that he played his way out of that already and signed that massive extension, which his house is a little interesting looking. It's massive, but kind of a lot of black and white. It gives me a little bit creeps.
Really?
I don't know. It was just a lot of color, like lack of color, I should say, in his house. If you haven't looked on Twitter yet, search up Connor McDavid's house on Twitter. You'll see the images that I'm talking about. Massive house. He did a great job. Like there's a basketball court in it, the great wine cellar, but a lot of black and white. Apparently his girlfriend designed it.
So you're saying he could afford a house like that, but he just can't afford Pete? I
mean, the way it was systematically done, right? Like it was all built to complement each other. So the whole house is on the same color scheme. But it would have been nice, splash a little blue on there or something just to lighten it up.
A little blue and orange for his team, maybe? I don't know.
Anything. Just it's a lot of black and white.
So what you're saying is they did the Islanders reverse retro.
Basically, they took what could have been a phenomenal alternate and made it just plain.
So it's a microcosm for the Islanders organization failing with the reverse retro.
Basically, and don't get me wrong, I would still love to live in that house. Well, listen, that house is one thing. That's a separate issue we're not going to talk about right now. But when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to talk with Steve Kournianos, who's the owner of the Draft Analysis on Twitter. He does a great job of talking about the draft prospects that have just been drafted and are about to be drafted. And we're going to dissect the Rangers prospects and Islanders prospects as well. And that'll be a great conversation. So stay with us and do not go anywhere.
You're listening to the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the BS Sports Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Welcome back to the BS Sports Show, everybody. Just a reminder before we have our guest interview on that you can call us starting at 6:45 at 802-294-2777. So, Stefan, I'll toss it to you.
Joining us now is Steve Kournianos of the Draft Analysis. Steve, welcome to the show. How are you?
What's up, guys? How you doing today?
We're doing good. Brendan, you want to kick it off?
I will. So the Rangers, at least in my opinion, not somebody as into it as you are, had a great 5th round. They got value in that round, and Brett Berard and Evan Vierling. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, what can Rangers fans expect from those two players, and how much value did they get in that 5th round?
Well, they're both forwards, right? Berard is a natural wing, although he has kind of center tendencies, and Vierling is a natural center. He's a bigger kid, Berard being the smaller of the two. Vierling was a highly touted OHL prospect. He was a top 2 or 3 pick in his OHL draft year, so the spotlight's been on him for quite some time. And when he played with Flint, I never really got the impression that he was playing like a number one center. I mean, a big part of that was because Ty Dellandrea was already there. Ty Dellandrea was a first-round pick for the Dallas Stars in 2018. So you could say in a way that he was blocked and he was the heir apparent. Whenever Dellandrea graduated, they'd hand over the reins to Veerling, and he'd be the number one center. But even in limited time, I mean, he was a little inconsistent. But what you did see when he was on was outstanding playmaking, outstanding vision, agility. He's kind of an inside player, not one of these guys that just stays to the outside and waits for things to happen. He likes to be the guy that drives play, whether it be in the offensive zone, in the neutral zone. And then he got traded to Barrie in the middle of the season, and Barrie was, I guess, more of a contender than Flint was. And when he got to Barrie, he became their top-line center. It was probably what drove the trade because Barrie already had a premier wing prospect in Ty Forrester, and Forrester was a first-round pick this year of Philadelphia. So when they paired up Veerling with Forrester and then added another kid named Ethan Cardwell in another trade, that line very quickly became one of the top lines in the OHL, and Veerling had a lot to do with it. Now, granted, Forster's kind of a self-sufficient, high-volume shooter and scorer, so he was already an MVP candidate before Veerling showed up. But it was good to see Veerling, had that instant chemistry with a big-time finisher like Forster, and, of course, playing with a guy like Cardwell as well. So you're getting a 200-foot type. I wouldn't say he's like a shutdown type of the defensive stopper. He's more of an offense-first kind, but his playmaking and his vision is what really stand out. So, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we would have projected Veerling to be a potential first or second round pick. Maybe scouts felt that because he wasn't all that great in Flint and that maybe he was more of a product of Forster once he got to Barrie. That's why he was drafted as low as he was. But I think it was really good value, and he definitely helps add to the Rangers' center depth because they didn't have a whole lot of center depth coming into the draft. As for Berard, I mean, listen, I love the kid. He doesn't have any red flags. The only thing holding him back is his size. He's about 5'8" or 5'9", but he plays like a really aggressive, mean, angry kid, in addition to having all these elite puck skills. I mean, the NTDP last season was more of a defense-first, tight-checking, physical group as opposed to previous editions where they, it's running-gun finesse. And so out of that forward group on the NTDP, he was one of the better puck possessors, finesse guys, playmakers. Didn't require a whole lot of help on his wings or from his center to make things happen. Enters the zone with a ton of speed. He just makes smart decisions. And then on top of that, you get the toughness, the courage. He doesn't back down. You think of smaller players who are quick and highly skilled. You might kind of categorize them as being finesse types who stay to the outside and need perfect conditions to make things happen. But that's not the case with Berard. He's a line driver. And, but again, he's going to a big-time program in Providence, and they require their forwards to be effective in all three zones, both on and off the puck. So I think that he'll definitely be able to improve his defensive play. Not that it was anything bad, but we'll get to see what he could do. I mean, when he played against college kids for the NTDP, remember they play about 10 to 15 games against premier college programs. They play Boston University. They play Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. And I never got the impression that Berard was intimidated. The stats might have been gaudier against his own peers, but still, again, in those college games, he was able to dictate tempo, to be a dangerous guy, put the other team's defensemen on notice. So I think both the long-term projects, they'll have to make a decision sooner on Veerling because he's a CHL kid, whereas Berard, they can let him sit in Providence for 4 years before they decide on giving him a contract or not. But both very good playmakers. So I like what they did in that fifth round.
Yeah, and it's amazing that size still has that much of a weight when you see somebody like a Braden Point, who is technically undersized, light up a postseason like he did last year. But the Rangers still got two very talented players there. And we knew coming into the draft that Alexei Lafreniere was going to be the number one overall pick. But what the Rangers did after that, it was up in the air. And they wound up trading up to draft Braden Schneider, who is a very physical defenseman from what I've read and seen in tapes. And he's currently competing to get a spot on the Canada World Junior team. So I was just wondering if you think he will get a spot on that team and what exactly the Rangers are getting in him.
Well, Schneider was given a shot to try out for last year's World Junior team, the team that ended up winning up gold.
Yep.
And so they had the World Junior Summer Showcase like they have every season. I was there. I actually sat next to John Davidson when Canada was playing. And Schneider really stood out. I really felt that he was assertive. He was confident. You saw the speed. You saw the physicality. So, when JD kind of fist pumped, when they made the trade and were able to draft him, I was thinking, I wonder if his play in Plymouth, is specifically that game, kind of planted the seed in his mind about what kind of player Schneider is. Because usually when these draft year guys try out for Team Canada, it's common for them to be maybe a little I don't want to say intimidated, but they know that their chances of making the squad aren't all that high. So maybe they try to do too much. Maybe they try to, they play timid, but that wasn't the case with Schneider. He acted like a veteran out there. And listen, he was Brandon's number one. Offense, it was a forward-centric attack. They had some really good forwards on that team. So Schneider's job was really just to keep things tidy in the defensive zone, on occasion skate things out. Usually when he got to center ice, that's where he ceded control of the puck. I mean, you're not going to see a guy like Adam Fox or Tony DeAngelo or Nils Lundqvist who will skate the puck into the zone, delay, create, let things kind of spread out, and you could run the offense through them. That's not Schneider's game. He's more of a dump-it-in type once he hits the center ice line. But he's got very good speed. So maybe if he could refine his puck skills, develop some more creativity, you might see some more offense from him. But he definitely ceded or acquiesced a lot of the offense to his forwards. And that's why I wasn't as high on him as several of the teams were, or even Central Scouting, was because I felt like if you're a number one defenseman in your draft year and you've played for all the big-time programs in the tournaments, you're on Hockey Canada's radar, you need to do more offensively, like in terms of dominate games offensively. Not all the time, but show that you have the ability to do that. And I really never got that impression from Schneider, although his big thing is joining the rush. He has the speed and the anticipation to know when the forwards are about to turn on the afterburners, and he could keep up with them, so that's a good thing. As far as Team Canada's roster this year, the left side is loaded, and Schneider's a righty. So on the right side, he really doesn't have a lot of competition. I have a feeling it's going to be between himself and Justin Barron, who was a first-round pick of Colorado. He too was also at the World Junior Summer Showcase and played well at that tournament. So I don't know. I mean, Jamie Drysdale, you got to figure he's going to make it as a righty, but he's more of a playmaking type. I guess the only other physical guy that he would have to compete with is Caden Korzak. He's a Vegas pick, and he has, I think, a year or two, at least a year in age. So if Canada wants to opt for more experience, I think if they do decide not to take Schneider, it's because the left side is loaded with those big physical, two-way types. And so maybe on the right side, they'll stick with a guy like Drysdale, maybe a guy like Jordan Spence, who's also a playmaker on the right side. So it's going to be difficult. But again, I think he played really well at the WJSS last year. And you got to think that Hockey Canada could find some use for Schneider, being a righty, being a good skater, the big physicality, cleaning up the front of the net. He plays also a disciplined game, so you don't have to worry too much about him taking really bad penalties when he tries to be physical, whereas some bigger defensemen have that issue. So I think he deserves it. It's just a matter of how Hockey Canada sees it.
Awesome.
So let's move on to the Islanders now. Obviously not as successful as a draft, some people may say, but you look at the Islanders, and Alexander Youngkrantz has been the prospect most talked about. But what about Alex Jeffries, a right winger from the U.S., 121st overall? What about his game is exciting for Islander fans?
He's a big, mean. I mean, he's listed at 6 foot, but he looks a lot bigger on skates, and he's thick too. He's strong. He's a gym rat, rink rat. I mean, you name it. He cares a lot about his development. Not that all prospects don't, but I just got the sense that, when you're a high school kid and you have that size, you already know that you're going to have a significant advantage over most of your opponents, because you just don't have a lot of big kids playing high school prep hockey, even whether it be Minnesota or whether it be Massachusetts, which are the two, prominent states that produce prep talent. But with Jeffries, listen, I mean, he's making the jump straight to Merrimack. He's not going to play in the USHL. I think he only has a couple of USHL games under his belt to begin with. But the thing about him, he's a goal scorer. And it seems like the Islanders in the last two drafts with their initial picks, their top pick or their second or third round picks, they're going for the goal scorers. They want their guys that know how to finish. So we saw that last year with Simon Holmstrom. Also, the other big winger, I forgot his name, Quebec League. Say again?
Kiefer Bellows?
No. The kid they drafted last year, the big kid. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He's a goal-scoring winger. And this year with their first three picks, they picked scoring wingers. I think Lundkrantz is more of a dual threat where he could be a playmaker and a scorer. Dufour, the guy that they drafted this year out of the Quebec League, he's more of a playmaker than a finisher. But Jeffries is definitely a finisher. He could be a playmaker, but he's got an elite shot and release, and he's got really good speed as well, deceptive speed or maybe underrated speed, and a pretty clean stride. But what you like about him beyond the puck skills and the scoring, because a lot of these kids could score at this level, it's his work ethic and his efforts off the ice. He's a hard worker. He's good off the puck. You can count on him to kill penalties. So we'll see. He turned down some pretty offers, some pretty big offers from impressive schools in the New England area, BU, BC, and he decided to go to Merrimack instead. Merrimack is definitely not a hockey powerhouse, although their recruiting efforts have stepped up the last few years. And I think maybe the decision was that his path to a top 6 or top 3 role to really showcase what he could do is probably shorter with a program like Merrimack than it would be at BU or Providence or BC or Northeastern. So I like him a lot. I had him in the 190s and he won 120 only because I have to be a little cautious with these prep kids. You know what I'm saying? And he didn't really play in a whole lot of tournaments, if really just select festivals and nothing on the international level. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, I think he was a really good pick for where he went.
Yeah, I mean, the Islanders are longing for someone to play alongside Barzal and just finish. While this guy's obviously a couple of years away, it seems to me that he's physically built to be in the NHL. Like a guy like we saw with Jack Hughes who got bullied around and stuff. An unreal talent. But this guy seems more like a Lafreniere where he's physically mature enough to make it at the NHL level. Another guy for the Islanders, Matias Rajaniemi, defenseman taken 103rd overall. He seems to be the complete package. I mean, you were not too high on him in your initial reports, but you said you were impressed later on. What impressed you about his game, and do you think he could be a top 4 at the NHL level?
Well, it'll be tough for him to become a top 4 at the NHL level because of his skating and the offense that he generated last year on the Pelicans junior team as a number 1. I mean, to me, based on usage and minutes wise, he was the number 1 on that team, and he was playing both sides of the ice as well. It was just that very like in a way like Braden Schneider. Except he doesn't have the skating. A lot of his points came from simple D-to-D passes, simple plays in the neutral zone, and a lot of just like shots on net. And it's not like he has this overpowering shot. For me, it's the defense is outstanding. I mean, this kid checks every block when it comes to defense. His one-on-one play, his gap control. He's not a very good skater, but it's deceptive. I guess what he could do is he could trick opposing forwards because they might think, oh, look at this big dude. I could just skate right by him. He looks kind of clunky out there, but he just knows how to keep his feet moving. He takes the right routes, whether moving backwards or forward, so he could keep that gap tight. And, he doesn't roam from the slot. He just makes a lot of smart decisions on the puck. So the Islanders, obviously, with the type of team that they have at the NHL level, they seem to like these defensemen, these guys with size that just make clean, crisp decisions. Their passes are crisp, but they're accurate. They have soft hands. And that's where Rajaniemi, his skills really come to the forefront. You're just not going to see a lot of point production. Is that a requirement to be in the NHL? Absolutely not. You could watch the playoffs any given season, and you see a lot of these big defensemen who don't put up points. They know that when the ice is tilted and they need someone to step up and make a key play, you're going to need a guy like Rajaniemi. And a lot of it ties into hockey sense, anticipation, guessing where the puck's going to go, guessing where the weak side dangers are going to come from. And that's where he really excels. And so I couldn't give him a high grade because of the skating and the lack of offense. But if I'm grading on strictly defensive defensemen, he'd be in the top, I would say, 25 of the entire draft. So maybe I was a little bit rough on him rankings-wise. But, when you watch a kid play and you see him struggling with the straight line speed, you're struggling with the offensive decision-making once they cross center ice, it kind of hurts them in the overall assessment.
Well, thanks again for joining us. One more before we let you go, though. Out of all the teams in the NHL, which team do you think had the best draft?
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, I would have to say the Rangers because they had the best player. So if you just shut it off after Lafreniere, you're getting the best player, and there was a significant separation between Lafreniere and Byfield. A huge separation, in my opinion. But really, it was Ottawa. And I know a lot of the Ottawa Senators fans might disagree with me, but they walked away with one of the top two talents in the draft outside of Lafreniere, and they drafted arguably the best defenseman in the draft. So when you can walk away with impact players like Stutzler and Sanderson, everything else after that is gravy. But then what they did thereafter, Wrigley Gregg is a fantastic energy player. They got him in the first round. Then Robbie Jorventy, one of the best goal scorers in the entire draft. So I know a lot of Sens fans wanted some more big names with those second and third round picks, but anytime you walk away with two top 5 talents, and Sanderson and Stutzler definitely were that, you have to give them a high grade. And then I'd also give high grades to Carolina and Florida as well. They drafted a lot of kids that I had in my top 90 throughout the draft. I think they got first round quality in 3 or 4 of their picks apiece. So those, if I'm going to give out grades, I'd give all those teams A+.
Yeah, well, I mean, Carolina seems like a team that could always draft well, and they have over the last couple of years. But, Steve, thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate your insight and you taking the time to come on with us.
All right, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Have a good one.
You too.
Great stuff.
It was awesome stuff, awesome analysis. And a lot of people, like, I could look at the NHL game and assess talent that way. I don't necessarily have the access to prospects or the time and effort that I'm willing to put in. But you hear the stuff that he says, and he knows the game. I mean, anytime you're sitting next to John Davidson looking at the players, and obviously if he saw Braden Schneider have a good tournament, so did John Davidson, which is why they were so high on him. But, I mean, the analysis there is phenomenal. And obviously the Rangers and Islanders have a lot to look forward to, especially the Islanders seem to have gotten a couple of steals later in the rounds.
Yeah, and obviously with prospects, it's very hard to say, well, he's going to be great. You got to see how they play. They're, like you said, he's not too high on prep kids because, they're playing for an organization like that. It's not, they're not playing against the best of the best. They're playing within that organization, what that organization plays. But again, always exciting because the game is getting younger and you see all these players that get drafted. The talent is just unreal at the age of 17, 18. It's just absurd.
It really is. And I mean, we just had the whole 25 under list, and the league just gets younger and younger, more talented. And even the assessment of these kids, right? You're talking about a Braden Schneider type of player would have been much more highly regarded because he is a defense-first defenseman, big guy that hits, doesn't take penalties, and could protect the front of the net. But now because he doesn't have that necessarily elite offensive skating ability and finishing ability as a defenseman, he falls a little bit. So it's crazy how the assessment continually changes.
Like we're talking about the Islanders guy, the last guy we spoke about in Raja Niemi. Not really much on the offensive side, but wow, is he a great defensive defenseman. And he fell in the draft. It's just crazy how it's offense first when defense wins championship has been the saying in every sport forever. But it's looking more like they care more about the offense. And that's how the game's changing. The game's evolving. It's not going to be the same thing. The Islanders, defensive system. A guy like Raja Niemi is probably perfect for their game. But he went to a team that's running gun like the Ottawa Senators, where it's just everybody try to score as much as you can because we can't play defense. I mean, you don't want a player like that. You want a defenseman that can score. So it's very interesting to see. But let's move on now to NHL Rewinds.
Yeah, so again, another great week of NHL Rewind. And I'm going to start things off with, in 2000, the legendary Scotty Bowman coached his 2000th regular season game, which, of course, was a win. Seems like most of them were in Scotty Bowman's career. But the Red Wings beat the Canucks 3-2. He received a 2-minute standing ovation, and he wound up finishing with 2,141 career games coached.
Yeah, I mean, we all know how good he is. But to get 2 minutes, you know how long 2 minutes is?
It's a long time for just a standing ovation, and I'm sure every single Red Wings fan in attendance, their hands were hurting after that 2 minutes.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's well-deserved. 2,000 games. My back would be hurting after, 7.
I mean, that's a long time.
Money does help with the back pains of coaching, but I mean he was that good that he could coach for that. I mean, you see a lot of coaches that they get fired, they get hired by a new team. They get fired, they get hired by a new team. He was a guy. I mean, he coached. He's with the Blackhawks now, right? But he coached with.
No, you're thinking of Scott Bowman. You're thinking of Stan Bowman.
Stan Bowman. Are they related?
Yeah. That I told you last week. We had talked about how the Bowman family takes over management. Those are his sons.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just awesome to see a guy like that work. I mean, he deserved everything that happened. So a 2-minute standing ovation should have probably been 3 minutes, but again, they got tired. They got to get back to the game.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you want to take 2003? I think this one's really unique.
Yeah, this is a fact that if you knew this, you're lying to yourself because there's no way you did. 2003, on today's date, Matthew Barone became the first NHL player in 23 years to score a goal against his brother, Marty Barone. So yes, Martin Barone had a brother who played in the NHL. Never knew that. That's a crazy fact. His celebration better have been like the sickest, right in his face too. That would have been awesome. That's great.
Well, I saw on Twitter today that Marty Barone he quoted somebody's tweet that had, I think it was Mike Commodore, and he goes, "Thank you for my yearly reminder that this still happened." So obviously it's been like pushed in his face every single time. And I really hope you're right, because a celly like that, now granted, it's the NHL, so you don't want to have like that type of obnoxious celly, but I'm sure once people realize who scored, like if I was on the defensive team and I gave up the goal, I'm like, oh man, that stinks. But then I realized it's his brother scoring against his brother. If he was doing a little bit extra, I'd be like, you know what? I probably would have done the same thing.
I'm going to say the player has the advantage over the goalie brother because obviously they've been playing on the street with each other growing up, ice. A goalie could read all he wants in the play, but I can't imagine scoring against your brother. You ever get into a fight ever? Like ever? I scored on you in the NHL. Like, I mean, obviously Barone had a long career given the fact that we didn't even know he had a brother. But it's so funny, though, that you score against that. That's just great.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, he's got the sibling rivalry. He wins a little bit, slight edge, even though, like you said, Biron wound up having the more noticeable NHL career. And now, of course, he's still working in the NHL as a broadcaster.
Well, we know that, like, Wayne's Gretzky, the Gretzky brothers have the most points combined.
Yeah, his brother has 1 point.
Yeah. It's great.
That's crazy. That will always be one of my favorite stats. And I don't know if it will get broken just because of how many points Wayne has. But
probably not.
In 2006, Chris Chelios breaks Phil Housley's record of games played by a U.S.-born player with 1,496. Chelios still has that record to this day, as he finished with 1,651 games played. I believe Matt Cullen is 2, which not a name you would think about, but Matt Cullen played for a long time and didn't miss many games, so he's number 2 in U.S.-ranked players. But Chris Chelios, man, what a career he had. We got to watch the end of it, not prime time Chris Chelios, but still was a very good NHL player.
He's still good enough to be at the NHL level and do what he has to do. That's awesome, though. I mean, anytime you break a record, it just shows the hard work and dedication that you do at an early age. You know, we're talking hockey right now, and we both played ice hockey growing up. You have to have the will to compete. And then when you get to the NHL, you know, all the hard work paid off. You get to the NHL, you have the will and compete to stay in the league for that many years and do that. It's one thing to make it to the NHL. A lot of players make it to the NHL 5 or 6 years, they're done. Why are you done? I just couldn't compete. Just the level, the top of the level you have to play at every single day when you wake up. You know, that takes a toll on your body. And to do that for that long and still never have a huge drop off where you're, all right, you're going to be healthy scratch this night or healthy scratch that night. Like Matt Cullen played till he was in his 40s because every morning he woke up and said, I'm not done. I'm not done yet. You have to have that mentality that not a lot of players have. And to break a record and then to break it even further. I mean, you know, he broke it at 1496. Then he played until 1651. All right, it's not just like he broke the record and said, all right, I'm good. No, he decided to play more, and that's just determination. I'll end it with 2018 on this date. Patrick Laine scores 5 goals on 5 shots in an 8-4 win against the Blues. Brennan, my math's correct. That's 100% shooting.
That is 100% shooting percentage right there. And when you talk about those high shooting percentage we see, I think that at the end of the season, Laine's might have been slightly inflated because of that one game.
Yeah, it's just when on a given night when you just have that magical touch, anything is possible. I mean, we saw Matthews in his NHL debut score 4. We saw
Zibanejad score 5 against the Caps this year, and that was unreal.
That was absurd. But it's crazy. It's crazy. Just
that mark is extraordinarily high and hard to reach in one game.
When you score 3 goals, right? You would think the defense would be like, all right, you know, I don't know what the score was of this game, whatever it was, but 8-4. They won 8-4. He was a one-man show. I mean, he had a teammate score 3 at least, but you got to guard this guy a little better than that. Every shot he's taking, but that also shows the smartness of Laine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure one of them might have been an empty net. maybe.
That's what I'm thinking. But you look at it, and it's all right. He took 5 shots in the game. Did he have an opportunity to take 10? Probably, but he chose make a better play. Maybe, you don't know. He could add an assist in this game too.
He might have also missed the net. Remember, that doesn't count as a shot goal. So we'll go that way. I know he scored 1 in the first, 1 in the second, and 3 in the third.
That's how you do it. You build your way up. That's great.
So that's how that breakdown works. We got 5 minutes before the phone lines open. Obviously, we want you guys to call in, but before that, we have a great segment here called Hang 'em Up or Lace 'em Up, Stefan's brilliant idea. So, Stefan, I'll kick it to you. I'll let you kick things off here.
Yes, what we did was we have a list of players who we think could either hang them up right off into the sunset or play a couple more years if they can. So I'll start it off. Brendan, we'll kick it to you, though. Zdeno Chara is the first name on this list. He's 43 years old. He's played in 1,553 games, 656 points, and he's a 2011 Stanley Cup winner. Brendan, you hanging him up, or is he playing more?
I mean, I don't think that he's done, so I'm going to say that he's going to play more, lace him up, but I will say I don't think he goes anywhere but Boston. So if Boston won't have him, then he's going to be done.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say hang him up. He's had a hell of a career. If he did not win a cup, I would say keep going. You know, you're clearly playing because you love the game, but you also want to win. He's done that. The Bruins had a great regular season. You know, Tuukka Rask leaves. That really puts him at a disadvantage in the playoffs, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him hang up. Like you said, if the Boston Bruins say, listen, you know, we're gonna it's time, and especially with a COVID year where you don't know what's gonna happen. We saw, who was it? Was it Niskanen retired? No, who
Yep.
retired? Yeah, Niskanen retired. He wasn't. There's definitely more he had left in the tank, but because of, you know, he's won. He's had great seasons. He's won, and with the unknown of this season, you know, do you want to put your life, family in jeopardy? You've done what you can do at the NHL level. I don't know. So for that reason, I would say hang him up. But if the Bruins say, "Hey, I'll come back on a 1-year deal," go for it. Next on this list, a name that we haven't heard really about in a couple of years, still playing though, is Troy Brouwer. 35, 851 games played, 363 points. He played 13 games this past season. Brendan, hanging him up or playing?
Hang him up. He only played 13 games last season, didn't produce. He's clearly deteriorating. Teams aren't valuing him at the same rate they used to. I think he's done.
I completely agree. Moving on to a goaltender. We have 2 goalies on this list. First goaltender is Craig Anderson. He's 39, 646 games played, 289 wins, 3.25 goals against, 902 save. He's never won a cup.
I think he will stay, but I'm going to say hang him up. I just don't see him playing anything besides a backup role. We know the battle his wife had. I feel like he's a family man at heart, and why not go and just have that time with your family that you might not have, especially if it's a bubble-like thing. He's going to be distance. Hang him up.
See, my thing is he's been on such a bad Ottawa Senators team for a couple years. They were good a couple years ago, but quickly became a joke in the league. They're working their way back. I don't think he should. He doesn't. There's no reason to go back to Ottawa because they have Matt Murray. Clearly, his time has passed there. But I would love to see him do like a Lundqvist did, take a 1-year deal somewhere just to compete. You know, his stats aren't terrible. They're not good. His goals against is bad, but the team defensively wasn't good. 902 save percentage very low. I just want him to get one more chance being with an actually good team in front of him to see what he can do before he calls it a career. Next, we our Ryan Miller. 40 years old. He's already 40. That's kind of crazy. We grew up watching this guy. He was anytime our teams play the Sabres, it was, well, our team will probably win, but it's going to be really hard to score on this guy. 780 games played, 387 wins, 3.10 goals against, 907 save. He has also never won a cup.
So this is not as hard as it's going to be because I'm going to say hang him up. But when you think about Ryan Miller, going to the Ducks kind of threw him off a cliff. He went to the Pacific Coast. The Ducks, you know, not a great team anymore. So you haven't heard his name, but this guy used to be so much fun to watch and goal for the Sabres. And, I mean, even on Team USA all those years, one of the greatest American goalies of all time. But it's time to retire.
I completely agree. I mean, we saw him do that Superman slide where he caught the puck.
Yeah, that was an awesome save. That really was.
He did that at 38, 39 years old? So anything's possible, but I do agree his time has come. Next on the list, we got Ilya Kovalchuk. 37, 926 games played, 876 points. He had 10 goals and 16 assists last year. He played for 3 teams last year, Montreal, Kings, and Washington. He has never won a cup.
Yeah, and I mean, he talked about how he loved his time in Montreal and would be open to going back there. So that type of verbiage and discussion means he's probably coming back. So I'm going to say he's going to lace him up.
I will agree with you. The next one on our list, our last one, It's a tough one. It's Jay Bomeister, and he's 37. This past February, he had a cardiac episode on the bench, went to the hospital. I don't know if he didn't play after that.
Nope.
He can return, but obviously health's a factor. He's got 1,240 games played, 424 points. What are you saying, Brendan?
I want to see him make a comeback, for that feel-good story. I think this guy used to be an Ironman, so he probably has something left in the tank, and I feel like his mentality is I want to come back, I want to prove something. Now, granted, if he's not cleared, there's no need to rush it or do anything to jeopardize his life, but I want to see him lace him up.
I think if you get back on the ring for one game and do like one of those, let him play his last game on his terms. You never want to see a guy leave without, having that right to be like, okay, it's my time to finish. You don't want
like a Brian Bickle-like thing.
Yes, you don't want any outside anything to happen where you have no control. So if he come back, maybe it's not the best. He's going to take hits and do all that stuff. It's not good for his health. He already had a cardiac episode. You don't want it to happen again. For that reason, I'm going to say hang him up. Brendan, we got our first phone call.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Hello?
I can hear him.
You can hear him? All right.
Yep.
How about now?
Go for it. Ask your question, buddy.
Hey, guys. So my question is, the NHL has plans to go into a bubble. How do you think this will affect the players?
So the NHL does plan to go into a geographic realignment. We're not quite sure if it's going to be a bubble situation yet, but if they do, it affects everyone because of the whole family situation. We talked about Tuukka Rask leaving the last time they had it during the postseason. You're going to see more players be reluctant to suit up and play if they have to spend a lot more time away than just 2 months from their families. So that's the biggest impact. Stefan, what do you think?
I would say it's like what you said. It's being away from their families. They just gave you a whole playoff where they were away from their families. They sacrificed enough. I know Matt Martin. He left as baby girl was born. She's now a couple of months old. He missed all that time with her. He's not going to get that back. And if the Islanders had won, maybe you go, okay, it's worth it. But, family is so important. I think it's definitely more mental than physical. Being stuck in one spot, it gets old fast. And, yes, they're playing a sport. They're being paid to do so. But that's a lot of sacrifice for the league to make money. If they could do it without doing the bubbles, I think people would rather stay with their families. I mean, there's families, their wives. They want to be there for them. And that's part of the grind, too. When a bad game, you get to go home to your wife and your kids and have happiness and talk about it and, relax. You're in the bubble. It's, all right, we just lost yesterday. Go to work the next day. All you're doing is hockey, hockey, hockey. And, yes, they love the sport. Don't get me wrong. But I think mentally having your family around you, family and friends, when you could go and talk to them and hang out with them, obviously safety with COVID would be a better option than a bubble.
Yeah, you need a mental break every once in a while from the game. It's just everybody does, right? I mean, that's why they started instituting bye weeks to keep people healthier, get them away. Players take vacations now. I mean, that mental aspect of hockey is grueling, especially since it's physical, 82 games every other night, sometimes back-to-back nights where you have to put up with that and have that stress of I have to perform. So that mental break is integral.
Great question, though, because you do think of sports, and it's, well, what percent is mental, what percent is physical? Hockey is such a physical sport. And it's, where's hockey rated on all the sports? Football, they hit really hard. Yeah, but take football and put it on skates. Next caller. Welcome to the BS Sports Show. Hello?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
We are doing great.
Hey. I was actually just wondering if you think that with the Blackhawks hiring of Kendall Coyne Schofield, if you guys think it will open the door for other females to be hired in the NHL.
So I think it will. And I think that the Kim Ng hiring by the Miami Marlins of baseball was the first, kind of opening. And now with all the movements that have gone on and how women are starting to show that they are being very successful in the sports industry, particularly, that this hiring will just open the door for more. And I've been surprised that there haven't been more hirings already. But this one, it's a great one for Chicago, and I think that there's only going to be more to come.
And there's not a better person to, start breaking the barriers. Coyne has been an unreal hockey player and a great person to talk to about women in sports. And it just shows that the sky is truly the limit for women in the sport, because it's not just a guy's game. We see reporters and players get the short end of the stick. Well, you're a female. You can't know what you're talking about. You can't do this. No, you're just ignorant. It's the fact that it's hockey. You speak hockey. How many players from other countries come over? They don't speak English, but they know the sport of hockey. They speak hockey. Coyne is a great person for that. It also shows women that they can do anything. Younger girls playing that go, well, I could play all I want, but I'll never reach that level. It shows that you can. Maybe it's not in the NHL because women can't play in the NHL yet. But at the same time, it shows that women can still be a part of hockey. We have our next caller. Hello, welcome to the BS Sports Show.
Hey, guys. Great show. So listen, in a shortened NHL season, I'm going to put you both on the spot. Who are the top 2 teams that make it to the Stanley Cup, and who wins the Stanley Cup in a shortened season next year?
I don't even want to answer that question because I'm going to be wrong.
Way to put us on the spot. Well, Brendan, don't say the Rangers. So the top 2 teams that
Not the Rangers.
Okay, well, you got to think about, let's say it's a shortened season, so less games. You need to have I think it's got to be a tandem.
I know who I'm going to pick.
All right, go for it.
I think that it's going to be the Colorado Avalanche that win it all.
I was also going to say the Colorado Avalanche, but who do you think in the East is going to make it back? I don't think it's going to be the Lightning.
The East, it's hard for me to predict because if there is geographic realignment, it changes so much. I mean, if Boston gets added to the Metro, you're talking about a good Metro team having to play somebody they normally wouldn't. Boston might be playing somebody they normally wouldn't, but I do think Boston will have a chip on their shoulder, so I will take them.
We think too much alike, Brendan. It's kind of a problem. I was going to take the Bruins, but in a season like this where you just got to get on a run. That's all it takes. I mean, anything can happen. That's why hockey is the greatest sport. We could take the top teams in the league each year and say, well, they're going to win the cup. It never happens. Now, I don't think a team like Columbus is going to win the cup, but they have a chance to sneak into the playoffs. And once you get into the playoffs, anything's possible. But I would say the safe bet, definitely Colorado. I don't think it's now or never, but I think they have the pieces to do it. Vegas, too, though, could be back over there as well. I could see Vegas making it to the cup final, and I really do think the Bruins have a good chance of doing that again. Tandems. That's why I don't think the Lightning, because let's say it's a shortened season with more games, though, in a short amount of time. Vasilevsky has shown that he doesn't really wear down. He showed a little weak goals here and there in the Stanley Cup Finals and even against the Islanders now and again. But, I mean, he plays so much during the regular season. The fact is, do you have a serviceable enough backup that's going to help the Lightning get to a high seed, and then it's the playoffs? But once the playoffs happen, he's playing all the games.
That's what it is. They might take that lower seed, get him the rest, and then that's another team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Lightning are in that conversation. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston is. The Capitals, do they have one more run in them? I mean, are the Flyers going to be taking another step? There's a lot of teams that could. Could Carolina continue their growth? But honestly, it all depends on the type of games that we see play, how long the season is, what the schedule looks like, the travel situation. There's so much that still has to be determined. But I think that Vegas or Colorado in the West are my favorites to win the Cup.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I just think Vegas and Colorado is such a fun. I don't think Dallas gets back. I think it was this was your time, and there it goes. Just because it took them forever to figure it out.
Yeah.
And Sagan being hurt when he's returning, how much of a difference is that going to make to their lineup? I mean, they found guys that they didn't know they even had that were absolute stellar players. What's the guy's name on Dallas that went absolutely off?
You're talking about the rookie?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I'm blanking on his name. We couldn't even say his name the first time because we didn't know how to pronounce it right.
Yeah, I mean, you find guys like that where that helps. With a guy like Sagan being down, yes, this guy's no Sagan, and maybe he's going to be a bust. Maybe he had a great run, and that's all it is. But at the same time, you found the diamond in the rough, and now one of your top players is gone. He could help counteract that issue, but I think Dallas is one and done. I'm going to say Vegas and Colorado is going to be in that Western Conference final, and I'm not going to take – unless something drastically changes with their team or they get off – the thing is, if you get off to a slow start, your playoff chances are in jeopardy. It depends if they do an expanded playoff.
Well, yeah. If they shorten the season down and do geographic realignment, I feel like they might have to do a slight postseason expansion just because it's tough to justify playing 60 games, having teams that are used to playing 82 have to compete over those 60 games. Now you're playing new opponents. You're playing the same opponent 9 times. If the Rangers, have success against these divisional opponents and wind up being one of the top teams in the Metro, say, that's not real. It's not accurate because if they had to play all these Western Conference teams, how would they have fared, right? So I think you might be looking at another expanded postseason.
And I'm fine with that. I mean, you're in a Metro division.
Yep.
That's going to be absolutely stacked. And while I think the Islanders are they're going to do well, it's just the question is, do they have enough pieces to get back? I mean, they made it 2 games away from a Stanley Cup final. 2 games away. But do I look at them and go, they're a Stanley Cup contender to win an actual cup? I don't, because they have missing pieces. They have things they have to figure out. First off, your power play can't be that bad, and you think you're going to win a cup. You just can't have a bad power play like that, because in the playoffs, your opportunities to score are not as high as it is in the regular season. Defense locked in. That's what Islanders got so far, is because defense first. But then you go up against a team like Tampa, who not even is really good on the power play. They draw penalties because they move their feet and do all that stuff. You're at a major disadvantage if you can't score when they give you those opportunities. You look at Lightning; they won the whole thing. Their power play was electric. The pieces they have on that power play are awesome because they have star quality players. Look at the Islanders; it's Matt Barzal and good pieces around him. They got far. Good pieces around him. The biggest question is getting a superstar to play alongside Barzal, which would help with the power play, would help with their offensive output. So it's tough for the Rangers. It's the reverse. So much offensive talent.
Yep.
But in the playoffs, it comes down to defense. We saw it happen against Carolina. They really had no answer. The goalies can play as well as they want to play. But, I mean, when a defenseman gets walked and things happen, all that kind of stuff, and you give up goals and you don't score enough back, that's where the pressure lies. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with an expanded playoffs. But before we end this, Brendan, especially in the shortened season, do you think teams that have a true number one are at a disadvantage to teams that have quality tandem?
Normally, I would say no, but it again, we don't know the schedule, right? If it's regular rest and just spread out over 60 games in a couple of months, then no. If you have a Vasilevsky type of goalie, you don't need a necessarily great tandem. You just spell him a couple of games, he'll win, his fair share of them. Now, if they wind up you travel to one spot and play at that location 3 and 4 days, and then you go back home, get tested, and then do the same thing. Yes, a team that has a 1A and 1B will be better off because the goaltenders can get a little more rest than a straight starter-dominated franchise. But there's so much unknown still in this league, right? I mean, if it is a 1A and 1B, there's a lot of teams, the Islanders and Rangers are two of them, that have two good goaltenders that would benefit from that. So, interesting to see.
The Devils as well. That's the crazy thing.
Yep.
You might see teams that you don't think have any business being in the playoffs. A team like the Devils. If Corey Crawford has a great year and helps Blackwood calm down, and Blackwood's playing less games because it is, let's say there's back-to-back games more often, you might see a team like the Devils find a way to sneak their way into it when in a regular 82-game season, you may not see that. So it's definitely interesting, and then that's why people take it with a grain of salt. Well, it was a shortened season, this happened. But it's all about what do you do with your opportunities, and that's what it is this, okay, it wasn't an 82-game season, it was 60, and you had many back-to-backs, but were you a good team on back-to-backs, or did you just struggle? If you were a good team on back-to-backs, you deserve it as much as anybody to make it to the NHL. That's the hardest thing to do, is play consecutive nights and still bring that same game. So it is very interesting to see, and hopefully there is a season, Brendan, because that is a major question mark right now as COVID continues to spike, as CBA agreements is going south, and we've seen lockouts before. We don't think it's going to happen, but like we say every week, we need hockey back. It's going to be a real damn shame it's going to be BS, Brendan, if we don't get one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the CBA is the bigger issue, right? I know COVID is obviously a global pandemic and people are scared, and rightfully so, but I don't think that that's the issue that the NHL is facing, because they already had that and they dealt with it with flying colors in a bubble, and they'll be able to deal with it again, especially as a vaccine starts to become more prominent and testing is already becoming more prominent, especially rapid variety. So I don't think that necessarily is withholding it. It's the money situation. Financials are what determines pretty much everything in our lives, and the NHL, especially Gary Bettman, is going to have to eat some of that pride and give the players their money just so they can get the product on the ice and get that money in return that they've missed out on over the last 5-6 months.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, who do you side with? You feel for the players. They sacrifice so much, and I would have to agree. You got to side with them, because what they did, it's one thing to get everybody in the bubble. It's another thing to bring that level of competitiveness given the situation. It could have been really interesting to see some hockey players just not be 100% there because they're worrying about their family back home. They're worrying about the pandemic. They have to focus on, you can't leave your hotel room. You can't do that. It might affect them on the ice. It did not. We got such competitive playoffs that when you look back, you're never going to think this was a COVID Cup. I'm never going to use the word COVID Cup when describing it, because it was harder to win, I think. It was harder to win this time given the elements, and just the teams were 125% committed to, listen, we're here to do one thing, and that's to win.
This is a hot take, but I think the competition level was great. The level of play was not.
Really?
I think that a lot of teams, especially, teams that you would normally have dump and chase, grind it out with the fans there, that type of energy, it took away from it a little bit. So these teams were very rested. They were very equal in level of play, but the level of competition that usually you see get amped up each round in the postseason, it didn't feel that way. I think that they played each other well, but they all would admit that if this was a full season, they didn't have that layoff, their games would have been better.
Oh, well, yeah, because they would be in prime form. They sort of had to reboot themselves and knock the rust off. But all in all, I think it was a great playoff. Given what could have been,
yep,
it did very well.
It definitely did. And, I mean, it's 7 o'clock. We got through another 2 hours. Episode 26 in the books. 2 great interviews done today. And, I mean, we look forward to doing this again next week.
Yeah, we're going to have a really cool guest, so stay tuned. We'll be posting this show tomorrow. You get on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and thanks for the calls as well. We really appreciate those. We'll see you guys next week.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.